I met many of the survivors of the massacre in Srebrenica as well. Met some of the imams, some of the leaders of the resistance movement. But one name that continued to keep on coming up, and that name will form our lecture for today, was somebody that was greatly admired by every single person that I met. And that was the former president of Bosnia, and that is Ali Izetbegovic. And this is a name that I believe we should all be more familiar with. The hero, the legend, the philosopher, warrior, king. I was thinking, is there anybody in the last 100 years that is of a similar caliber? And I could not think of anybody in the last 100 years. Yes, before that, yes, but in our generation, post-World War II, I cannot think of any person that comes close to a genuine leader and commander in multiple disciplines who garnered so much respect amongst the ummah and amongst his people and left such a deep legacy. Everybody was in awe of him, and one or two people even teared up when they mentioned his name to me. And that really is a sign of respect and ikhlas and qabul amongst the hearts. And his book, he has a number of books, his book Islam Between East and West, it is one of the first books ever written in our generation that attempted to form a defense of Islam against the secular hegemonic overtake of Europe and of the rest of the world. And I remember reading this book when I was, 16 years old, 15, 16 years old. And at the time I didn't fully understand, but all I knew is that this was the only figure in the Muslim world that was a prime minister or president and mentioning Islam with a sense of pride. Back in the 90s, nobody of the Muslim world was as proud of being a Muslim and a leader of his people. So he kind of sort of is a precursor to a number of other figures in our times. I don't want to mention names, but you get the point. Number of people in our times, very few. Some are in jail, some are still in power, but you get the point that there are some people that we have that genuine respect for. He is a precursor. In fact, he's the first of that generation to do so. So I wanted to introduce him because I really think there's so many lessons to learn for all of us. His name is Aliya, there's a J in it, but the J is pronounced Y. Aliya Ali Izetbegovic, and he was born in 1925 in a small village in Bosnia. What is Bosnia? Bosnia is the frontier, or it was the frontier of the Ottoman Empire and its foray into Europe. So Bosnia was the very last tip of the Ottoman Empire for 400 years. Beyond that, you had Europe. And so Bosnia is the only European Muslim majority country to this day. Its people are Slavs, from the Slavic people, right? Its people are Slavs. And the Slavic peoples, they are one ethnicity, one group, but because of history, they divided only on the basis of faith. So you have the Orthodox, who are the Serbian, you have the Catholics, who are the Croatians, and then you have the Muslims, who are the Bosniak. Serbs, Croats, and Bosnians, same language, same looks, same features, same groups of people. But 1,000 years ago, 700 years ago, groups of people split up only on faith. People on one side followed the Roman Catholic Church. People on the other side followed the Eastern Orthodox, the Russian Church. And in the middle, there was a massive province that we now call Bosnia. These people slowly began to embrace Islam until they became Muslim majority under the Ottomans. It was an organic conversion, no forcing, they converted. So the Bosniaks are the only Europeans, once upon a time when there was Andalus, then we no longer have it, the only Europeans who are converted to Islam as a majority within its country. The Ottoman Empire was controlling Bosnia as a wilaya, as a province for 400 years, and then the Austro-Hungarian Empire took over, but they allowed Islam to be practiced until the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed, and then a country that every one of us who's above the age of 40 knows, Yugoslavia, came into existence. Yugoslavia, the land of the Slavs. Yugoslavia, the land of the Slavic people. So you had a whole bunch of different people under this new country, post-World War I, Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia became a communist country. harsh communist country. And they had a strict control over religion. And it remained this way until the collapse of communism and the death of its last communist tyrannical ruler. His name is Tito. Tito was the last communist ruler. He ruled for over 40 years with an iron fist. In this time frame, our hero was born, when Yugoslavia is now taking over Bosnia, and the country is now veering towards anti-religion, hating religion. He is born pre-World War II, and the Bosniak people remember their heritage. He never saw the Ottoman Empire because he's born in 1925. He didn't see the Ottoman Empire Vilaya, I'm saying. But his ancestors, he knows who he is. He knows his Islamic identity. And even in World War II, he begins political activism to bring about a sense of izzah in the Bosniak Muslims. He forms a party at the age of 18. He forms a party called the Young Muslim Party. At the age of 18, he formed something called the Young Muslims. And it was just an educational chapter, no politics. He just wants to teach the Muslims to be better Muslims, to give charity. But the communist government found this to be a threat, and he was arrested and imprisoned for a number of years. And later on in life, he says that this was my first lesson, that Allah might bless you with a trial. Allah might favor you with a calamity. Because this was in the beginning of World War II. And he was imprisoned, and because he was imprisoned, he was not sent on the front line. Many of his friends, many of his other people died. And he said, I realized Allah saved me by putting me in prison. Because had I not been in prison, in all likelihood, I would have died. So he said, this was my first lesson, that Allah works in ways I won't understand. And something you don't like will actually be for your advantage. Allah saved me. I didn't know that in 1946. But 3 years later, when the war was over and I was released, and I realized, had I actually not been in jail, in all likelihood, I would not be alive. So this was, again, when you read he wrote an autobiography, I'm going to come to this, you sense iman from his childhood. So when he was released, subhanAllah, he goes and finishes a law degree. He becomes a lawyer, and he starts working in a law firm. He has a legal vocation, and throughout this time frame, his main concern is to preserve Islamic identity, because what was happening under communism, you all know communism, they don't like religion, right? And especially they don't like Islam. And so the communist rulers began shutting down the awqaf, shutting down the Sharia courts, shutting down any type of political agitation. Madrasas were all either shut down or severely controlled. Anybody who was deemed to be religious and young was monitored, no jobs, no upliftment. It wasn't as bad, so to be precise, Bosnia was not as bad as Albania and other places where religiosity was actually imprisoned. You would actually go to jail if you were religious. As for Bosnia, if you were Yugoslavia, if you were religious, you wouldn't necessarily go to jail if you prayed in the masjid, but you wouldn't get a job. You wouldn't become a member of the party. You would not get any perks and encouragement. So also, hijab was not necessarily banned, but again, there's social pressure. The elderly ladies, okay, but if you're young and praying, young and wearing hijab, you're going to get into trouble. And in all of this, he realized if he doesn't do something, the Islamic identity of his people will be gone in one generation. He began to realize, I need to save my people and the Muslim civilization by fighting this oppression in a legitimate manner. And in this environment, he wrote in the 1960s and 70s, he wrote a little tract in Bosnia, in the Bosnian language, called the Islamic Declaration. The Islamic Declaration. This was one of his first treatises, in which he said that his people are a Bosniak Muslim civilization, and they are proud of their heritage, and they're going to make sure they keep that identity, and they need to make sure they're a part of the society, and they need to form a Yugoslavia. He wasn't calling for independence. They need to form a Yugoslavia in which there's freedom to practice faith. We're able to pray and practice our religion. So this was called the Islamic Declaration. And in it, he made an appeal to the Muslims that you cannot continue down this path or else you will lose your identity. You have to come together and do something. And from this beginning, you sense in him a concern and a care for the ummah. All of this agitation was viewed with great concern by the government, by Tito himself. And he was taken to trial, and for the second time in 1983, there was a political trial in which he and 13 other people were jailed on charges of Islamic nationalism and of being a threat to the state. 1983, he was jailed once again for 14 years of harsh labor. Like he's going to stand in the sun and carry stones for no reason. Like something demeaning, something that is meant to break his spirit. And that video, we have video footage of that trial, that it's amazing video footage, really, the bravery, the courage. Wallahi, when I saw that video footage, I felt a sense of shame that why do we only look at Nelson Mandela and others? Good for them, Nelson Mandela is also a brave person, but we have the Mandelas amongst our own. We have the brave people amongst our own. And he speaks with courage to the judge. And he goes, I have not done anything wrong except being myself, being a proud Muslim. And in 1983 he goes, and I am a Muslim and I am a Slav. Like he puts it, well, how can you deny this from me? I am a part of your ethnicity. I am a Muslim, I'm a Slav. I'm not doing anything illegal, but you perceive me to be a threat. And whatever is considered to be illegal, it is your imagination. So he speaks with courage to the judge and he takes his sentence. In his autobiography, he writes, this was a very humbling lesson for me, that all of the theory and talk of being proud and whatnot, now I'm in jail, my dignity is taken away, I'm being somewhat tortured, I have to do manual labor, and that is the test of my words. He's writing this. Allah's testing me. Am I able to live up to what I preach to the people or not? Like it's a very good autobiography that he's written. I'm going to come to this as a while. So in this time frame, he also writes his most famous, one of his books as well, not his most famous, one of his books is called Notes from Prison. He would actually write on smuggled pieces of paper, on napkins, and people would come visit him, he would hand them that, and they would go and they would publish it. And it would get published in the world. Again, if you are above the age of 50, you might have some vague memories of this, but he became a national celebrity across the globe while he was in jail, especially the Muslim world. And his letters were being published, and they were eventually compiled in a book called Notes from Prison. He has a book called Notes from Prison. And in that time frame, he began writing his most famous book while in jail, and it is called Islam Between East and West. Everybody should be aware of this book, and it was actually published, it was translated to English and published in America by American Trust Publication, ATP, ISNA. It was published by America in 1984, and it became a bestseller. I have that copy still to this day. It became a bestseller, and across the world it was read, and it generated a lot of, compassion and writing letters on behalf of the government. That PR actually caused him to be released early. SubhanAllah, there's an anecdote here that the government pressured his daughter to come to jail. And the daughter basically said to the father that the government is offering you clemency, forgiveness, with the condition that you go quiet and you apologize for anything you have done. You just say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, and you go quiet, right? And SubhanAllah, can you imagine harsh labor? And he has no idea what the future is going to be. Remember, at this stage, who is he? Nobody knows him. Maybe a few people know him. At this stage, he's not the president. He's just a prisoner, right? And he refuses to leave that. He said, I didn't do anything wrong. What am I going to apologize for? To do what? That I'm a Muslim? That I'm a proud Slav Muslim? What did I do wrong? And he refused to go out of jail. And he continued his harsh labor for another few years. That came within 2-3 years that offer came, he turned it down. Within 5 years, the government was under so much pressure that they released him early in 1988. So his book was published in 1984, and he wrote it from jail. When you read that book, remember, it was written when he was in jail. It's available, you can find it on Amazon. And SubhanAllah, in 1990, basically Tito dies, and Yugoslavia, the Federation, communism. Remember, communism's dying, everybody's going down. And so the communist state dissolves out, and so he forms a new party called the Party of Democratic Action. And it was meant to be a Bosniak Muslim party. And when the elections were held in 1992, he wins with a landslide. and he becomes the president of the Bosnia and Herzegovina, the new nation that is formed, the collective head of state. Think about this. A few years ago, he was doing manual labor in jail, and now he becomes the president of the free country. We should know this name. Like, unbelievable how from jail being tortured, within 5 years, now landslide victory. The people love him. He is given the mandate, but the Croats and especially the Serbs, they rebel and break away. Even though he won with the majority, right? The Serbs have a hatred, which one day I need to talk about this. Wallahi, that's a whole different topic. I just came a few days ago. May Allah protect that land. You know, we say that Gaza is happening. We know that in other places, Uyghurs, in BJP in India. I did not realize that in my analysis, everybody knows this now, that region is volatile as well. And one spark, and it's going to start all over again. The level of sithering hatred that is still there, it was eye-opening for me. It's not gone. And the stories that I heard and the witnesses, and there are still towns. I visited a town, not all towns, but the town that one of the towns, there is still segregation, not black and white, Muslim-Christian segregation. This is a Muslim school, that is a Christian school. They don't study together. I was going to get some coffee. You know, I'm a coffee addict. It's halal to be a coffee addict. I get my coffee in the daytime. I was walking in, and the guy said, no, don't go there. Why? That is a Christian coffee shop. If you go there, they might give you trouble. Like, what? You have to go to that one that's a Muslim-owned one. And this is 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago. I said, this still happens in the world? It's like, no, you're not. He said, you're not physically under danger, but we just don't want any issues to happen. Can you believe this happened to me a few days ago, right? There's no you're not going to kill you, but we just don't want to cause any issue. We don't know what's going to happen. This is happening right now. Complete segregation in these small little villages and whatnot, that Muslims on one side, Christians on another, they don't intermix, they don't live together, there's literally an almost invisible wall. And even in other places, in Mostar and other places, it's not as bad, but the division is still there. And the anger is there, and the stories are there, and the genocide, and the people that it happened to, and the people that were killed, their families, and the people that killed, they're still walking together. Can you imagine? Unbelievable. So my point is that hatred that exists in the hearts of that group, I saw it with my own eyes, and we saw certain things as well. And in 1992, the Serbian, Milosevic and others, the Serbian community basically walked out of parliament, broke away, and said that we're never going to accept a Bosniak as a president. We need to go back to the original Slav kingdom, which was a Christian kingdom. And we will not accept, and he called Ali and Izetbegovic, he called him and the Muslims, he said, we're not going to accept the Turks and Turkic rule. Even though they're Slavic people, they're not Turks. These are Slavic people, right? But the word they used, we're not going to accept the rule of Turks. They call them Turkish, even though they're not. They're Slavic people. But the hatred they have of Islam in that regard. And so they broke away. And one thing leads to another. We'll talk about the history of Bosnia maybe another day. As you're all aware, in 1992, Bosnia, the entire region, it entered into one of the worst civil wars since World War II. One of the worst civil wars since World War II. And the Serbs were the ones who were primarily in the military, and the army generals in Yugoslavia, and the army generals and the people in the government in Yugoslavia were Serbs. So when Alija Izetbegovic is elected the president, the army is Orthodox. And so when they break away, they took all of the arsenal with them. So the Serbian group had the remnants of Yugoslav's army. Yugoslavia's army was fourth largest in all the world. The fourth largest army was Yugoslavia. When Yugoslavia breaks up, who gets all of that equipment? The Serbs took it away. The Muslims were not given power in communist Yugoslavia. The Muslims didn't have the positions. So when the breakaway happens, the Muslims are left with nothing. That is why if you see any pictures, you find the Muslims who are fighting, they're dressed in regular clothes. They have handguns. And the Serbs are the military fatigues, and they have the machine guns and the armed tanks and the weapons they have in the hands of the Serbs. So in that time frame, the entire country goes into civil war, and this was, as I said, one of the worst genocides and wars since World War II. Alija Izetbegović becomes now a diplomat par excellence. He begins traveling around the world. He comes to Europe. He meets President Clinton. He goes to the UN, and he keeps on telling them, intervene, stop this bloodshed, or at least give us weapons so that we can defend ourselves. And if you remember what happened in 1993, 1994, right? The UN refused to even give weapons to the Bosnians. They did not even allow, they put an entire arms embargo. If you remember, Clinton put an entire arms embargo in an area where genocide is taking place. One side has the weapons, the other side does not. And what the claim was, putting weapons is going to actually make the situation worse. And that was when, for the next 2 years, basically, oh, okay. There's a young child that's missing. Isa Hassan. Is he Isa? Isa, is that you? Are you Isa? Yes? No? Okay, everyone's looking at you. Sorry. Isa Hassan. There's a child that is missing. Your father is getting worried. So if anybody sees him, then you can go outside. Take the child outside. The parents are waiting outside. You're Isa Hassan. Your father's waiting for you. Go. MashaAllah. Tell the father his son is paying attention. Where's the father going? Right here. Yalla Isa, go. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. The child's benefiting and the father wants to go. Alhamdulillah. You should tell the father to come in rather than taking the child out. Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. Front row paying full attention. Right? MashaAllah. Allah bless. Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. This gives me hope for the future. This gives me hope. MashaAllah. Alhamdulillah. So in 1992, the civil war begins. For the next 3 years, as you should know, the biggest massacres in Europe take place since World War II. And of course, the single greatest massacre was Srebrenica. I visited Srebrenica, saw the museum there, saw the graves. There's video footage, I'll put it online soon, inshallah. And I met a number of, not just eyewitnesses, people who saw the genocide and were saved by Allah's miracle. They were there. I met a grandmother whose story haunts me to this day, which is 2 weeks ago. She's now a grandmother. She saw her husband, her first son, her second son, her third son, her entire family, one by one. She saw her son being taken away in the truck to the massacre in Srebrenica. And she just fainted, and that's it. She has no family left now. But subhanAllah, the youngest son got married, and he was shaheed, but the wife became pregnant. And so subhanAllah, one grandchild. That's why I say grandmother. One grandchild remains, subhanAllah, right? Allah's, but the stories, she was telling us, she visited our group, she was telling us that, the year before when her son got married, she invited all of the friends and neighbors, the same Serbian neighbor that she invited to attend her son's wedding, eating food, eating cake with them. That same neighbor tried to kill her. Like surreal, the level of hatred they have, right? The same person she grew up with, her son grows up with playing, invited to the wedding. But when the civil war begins, all that hatred comes out. And that same person tried to kill her, and Allah saved her by miracle. She told us the whole story. My point is that, in that time frame, Alija Izetbegović did not flee away. He did not even go to a safe spot. He remained in Sarajevo. And Sarajevo was under siege. It was the capital. It is the longest siege of any capital for the last 500 years. Sarajevo was surrounded by the Serbs. And Alija Izetbegović remained in Sarajevo, along with everybody else. There was a complete no food, just like Gaza, literally just like Gaza. Destruction everywhere, no food, no water, no electricity, no gas. All the people are in the city. You know what I found surreal, like we read about this, Sarajevo is like any city like Plano, like any Plano, that is like Syria. It's a European city. You don't think about it. It's like a normal city. But in 1993, it became the place of civil war. Wherever you go, you still see remnants of the mortars, the shots. You see bullet holes with my own eyes, more bullet holes I can remember because they haven't finished all the construction. And they told me in Srebrenica, for example, they told me in Srebrenica, the imam, we met the imam there. He said we used to have 48 masajid. In that Srebrenica massacre, they destroyed, he goes, not just the minarets, not just the walls. He said they destroyed all 48 masajid down to the foundation. They didn't even leave one brick of one masjid. The hatred that they have. And I saw video footage, which they recorded themselves, of the commander saying, get rid of all the Turks. We don't want one Turk left. This is on video. And they're not even Turks, by the way. But the hatred they have, get rid of all the Turks. We don't want one Turk left. And they rounded up more than 10,000 and they massacred every single man, except for a few that Allah say with miracles. One of them, subhanAllah, the story is just bizarre. Like, they shot everybody and one person was shot and he fainted. And when he fainted, all the bodies came on top of him. And when he came back, everybody thought he was dead, but in fact the bodies above him saved, subhanAllah. Like those are the only people that survived. Otherwise the whole Srebrenica town was completely massacred and the UN was watching. We'll talk about that I talked about that recently as well in another khatira that I gave on the commemoration of that day. In any case, Ali Izetbegovic tried his best to bring about a treaty until finally in 1995. And by the way, why did that happen? I found out over there, even though I heard about this, but to hear it from the people, that in spite of the embargo, in spite of the situation, because the Muslims fought back, and because they had what the other side does not have, which is Iman and Taqwa, actually the Muslims were gaining the upper hand in 1995. They were gaining the upper hand. And they were about to expel the Serbs back to where they came from. And that is when UN and US intervened. And we have, and I didn't know this, but we actually have the telegrams and the statements of some of the diplomats on our side over here saying we cannot afford to have a Muslim majority in Europe. We need to intervene and figure something out. Yugoslavia or its entire region cannot become Muslim ruled. And that was when Clinton and others intervened and okay, we're going to carve it up. These guys don't know anything better, divide and conquer. Well, like the same tactic, they just don't understand. Just cut it up and divide it into pieces. They cannot think anything besides this, So that was the plan that they had. Just divide it up, and this is Bosnia, this is Croatia, this is Serbia, and everybody gets a little piece of the pie, thinking that's going to solve the problem. It's not going to solve the problem. It's going to just simply delay, which is what we're seeing right now. So that's why we have all of these little countries. The Balkans is now split into multiple countries with the assumption that you're going to solve the problem. That was the Dayton Peace Accords, and Ali Izetbegovic very grudgingly accepted it. And he writes in his memoirs, he writes that, to this day, I do not know whether a just war is better than an unjust peace. Like, he was very troubled by what happened. Do we continue fighting and people are dying and being massacred? It's a just war. Or do we accept some peace, but it is an unjust peace? And so he writes, to this day, I don't know what is better, a just war or an unjust peace. And grudgingly, he accepted the Dayton Peace Accords, which again, divides the country into all of these different zones. And once, of course, that happens, he resumes his presidency. He's elected into office again with, massive, and then he voluntarily resigns because of health reasons, and he passes away in 2003 at the age of 78. He wrote a number of books, and we just mentioned 3 or 4 of them. The first one he wrote was the Islamic Declaration, when he wrote this, back in the 60s and early 70s. Then he wrote Islam Between East and West. And this book, what it does, it is a unique, it's like you sense from him, the only person I can imagine is like Iqbal, but also a king. So Iqbal never became a king or but this is now, he became a president, right? So imagine a philosopher who's also a politician and who's also ruling his country. So Islam Between East and West, Look at the title, Islam between East and West. That's what Bosnia is. Bosnia is literally between East and West. And in it, he wants to defend Islamic civilization and basically make the claim that the only successful community in the world is a community that is faith-based, believing in Allah and wanting good for fellow man. And he says only Islam can provide this. And of course, that's eventually what happens when he, becomes the president. He also has notes from prison, as I said, and the last book that is very difficult to get hold of. I actually don't have a copy yet, but I just read summaries of it online. It is his autobiography. It is called Inescapable Questions, Autobiographical Notes. It is out of print. I've tried to get a copy. If anybody does have a copy, if you don't mind lending it to me, and then I'll photocopy and give it back to you. Inescapable Questions, Autobiographical Notes. So to conclude, I have other points, but again, the time is limited. What makes Ali Izetbegovic so unique? I'll mention 5 points. Number 1, he was, for his time frame, the only European intellectual writing as a proud Muslim and defending Islam, even before he became a politician. There is nobody in the 60s and 70s, through and through European. He is European, he is Slav, he is Bosniak, who is defending Islam in such a manner. And he's talking about the notion of civilization being based upon Tawheed. That's the main thesis of the book. To have a civilization flourish, you must have Tawheed. Believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has this notion of vertical and horizontal. You must have a vertical component and a horizontal component. That's how he puts it, right? You must have a vertical, straight up to Allah, and a horizontal, helping mankind. And both have to be together. And he goes, some in the East, like Buddhism, only have the spiritual. Others in the West, like America, only have the horizontal. To successfully have a civilization, you need both here. So that's the first point, is that faith-based intellectualism. Second, that I find in him, moral courage and discipline. Twice imprisoned, hard labor, confined, almost physically tortured. And in that prison, he writes some of his best books. Can you imagine? It's difficult to imagine. You are working 14 hours a day in the sun, holding rocks, moving up and down. How do you find the himma, the courage, the acumen to go back to a jail cell shared by so many people, find a napkin, find a piece of it, and write a book that's going to become a bestseller in America? How do you do this? This reminds me of so many other giants like him, but in our times, who do we have? So the moral courage and discipline. Another point that we have, like I mentioned this multiple times, he's a philosopher, warrior, king. His book really is original. He's an intellectual, he's a thinker. He's also a warrior. In the Srebrenica, in the Sarajevo, he visited the Mujahideen multiple times. There's multiple video footage. He's encouraging them. He stays with his people during the battles. He stays in Sarajevo. He's at the front lines. And of course, he's a king, meaning he's a president, he's a prime minister. I can't think of anybody else that is similar to him in our entire generation, where you have the mind, you have he was too old to actually fight. He was in his 60s, but he encouraged and participated as best as he could. He stayed with his people as a general. This is what I'm trying to say. And obviously a diplomat as well. And final point I'll mention, one point he always brings up, the Bosniak people. He's a clear sense of pride. He says, we are Muslim and we are European through and through, and neither identity can be taken away from us. We are fully Slavs, we are European, ethnically, language-wise, culture-wise, and we are also Muslim. We represent a bridge between the East and the West. And he was proud of who he was, living publicly as a Muslim, committed to Islam, very concerned for his people, and Allah blessed him with an acceptance amongst all of his fellow Bosniak Muslims. So he was genuinely a person who combined between intellectual rigor, ethical restraint, leadership, patience, service to others, diplomacy, fighting, output of a philosophical nature, and in the end, he chose peace with dignity over easy war. He could have continued the war. He might even have won, but at what cost here? And it was a difficult decision. He actually grapples with it. Should I have done this or not? And in the end, he decided some safety is better than none. And going to Bosnia for me was a wake-up call, because it reminded me so much of Gaza. And I'll conclude on this point. How so? When you see the cities that I saw, The towns especially still in shambles. Some of the small towns, still the buildings are dilapidated, it wasn't built up. But Sarajevo is thriving and flourishing. And we went to Srebrenica, we met the Imam over there. And the Imam said to us that, as I said, we had 28 masajid, right? Every one of them was completely destroyed. Right after the massacre, he said, there were 0 Muslims in Srebrenica. 0. Women and children were physically taken away to camps, and 10,000 or 8,700 men were slaughtered. I visited the sites where they were slaughtered. I saw the bullet holes. I saw the graveyard. 8,000 graves, some of which only have a finger, a bone, because they mutilate. Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, the level of hatred is unbelievable, what we said. Yet when you now go to Srebrenica, subhanallah, 80% are Muslim now. And the Imam said, from that 28, we have to rebuild from scratch. And he said, we now have 24 masajid, and we had 5 tahfeel schools in Srebrenica. And in Sarajevo, when I visited over there as well, we met one of the muftis of Sarajevo, and we visited his school. And he said after the massacre, after the civil war, there was a resurgence of religiosity. We now don't have enough space for the students coming for Quran, for tahfidh. We're graduating huffaz. He goes, every year we graduate, I forgot the number, this many men and this many women. And he showed me the madrasa. We visited the madrasa over there. All of that revival came. And he goes, this place during the war was completely destroyed. But you couldn't see that. It looked like a beautiful building which people are studying. So from the ashes, from the destruction, from the dilapidated houses, Iman will never go away. And you will rebuild the houses. And from the people that have become shuhada, their brothers, their cousins, their descendants will come, and they will repopulate the same places, and they will bring back Islam. You cannot wipe Islam away. You can try to do so. It will not go away. So it gave me a lot of hope, seeing, in spite of all of that tragedy, subhanAllah, by and large, the people are returning to Islam. You hear the adhan, you sense izzah. That was not there pre-war. The war actually, no matter how tragic it was, it actually rekindled Islam. It made them realize what Islam meant to them. It made them come back to Islam, and it made them bigger, better, more powerful and stronger. They wanted to eliminate the Turks. But wallahi, many people became shuhada and they're with Allah alive. Wallahi, all of that hatred, all of that anger, it did nothing but fuel the izzah of Islam. And it actually encouraged the Bosniak people who were actually maybe a bit far from Islam in the days of communism. They maybe had gone away from Islam. What happened? Revived and rekindled. And they're now coming back to the deen like they could never have come back. This, inshallah ta'ala, we will see in Gaza as well. Gaza will come back bigger and better and stronger. Our Palestinian brothers and sisters will demonstrate for us the resilience of Islam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect His deen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive all of the shuhada and grant him firdaus. May Allah Azza wa Jal bless Ali Azad Begovic in particular and grant him firdaus for all that he has done. And may Allah allow us to serve His deen. Wa jazakumullah khair.